One in three Detroit elementary students change schools every year. That alarming statistic was revealed in a special report by Bridge Magazine and Chalkbeat Detroit. The frequent movement of students leads to lower test scores, higher dropout rates, and difficulty learning. I led a community conversation about the causes and possible solutions to this problem at an event that was hosted by Detroit Public Television, WDET Radio, Bridge, and Chalkbeat. Here's a portion of that discussion.
All of the factors that educators need in order to take a school that's struggling and try to turn it around become significantly more complicated if the students that they're working with, that they're making progress with, then disappear. And then, when that, so the students who start the school year in September are not necessarily the same ones sitting down to take the state exam in the spring. And so that creates all kinds of really difficult, complicated problems, which is why we wanted to delve into this issue and look at the consequence and what it means for schools. And then we also looked at the causes, right? So we knew that people were moving. We had the research from Ben and Sarah showing the extent to which they're moving. 1 in 3 kids, elementary school kids, every year are moving. But we wanted to know, okay, why are they moving? And one of the things that Chastity and I did is we spent part of the year with one 8th grade class at Bethune Elementary Middle School in Northwest Detroit and talked to each of the kids in the class. The average student in that class of 8th graders had been to more than 4 schools on their path to 8th grade.
The bottom line is, why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because, like Aaron said, it's not good for kids. Moving your kid from school to school to school is not good for kids. The scores show it, and I think that this discussion right now will help to inform people in Detroit and across the state. When you hear that Detroit has the very worst test scores of any school in the world, Craig, or at least in the nation, part of it is Detroit's decline, Detroit hitting rock bottom in the nation on the nation's report card, happened at the same time as this uber mobile student. It's part and parcel why students are performing so badly. They don't sit still long enough.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle is one way to look at this, right? Choices here, it's probably not going to go away. So how do we fix this? What are some of the things we could do that would directly sort of discourage the behavior that parents have become really used to in Detroit?
Improve the quality of the schools.
Okay.
I mean, that's
I can snap my fingers and do that, right?
Come on, Stephen. Snap your finger.
From a parent perspective, what's been your experience with kids moving from school to school during the school year and disrupting that consistency that's so important to learning?
Well, I have moved my children to 29 different schools.
Wow. 29. In what time frame?
I have 5 children. So from kindergarten to 12th grade.
And talk about that decision each time to say, we're in this school, and I think we've got to go somewhere else. What is it that brought you to that decision each time?
I was not happy with what was happening in the building. And when I tried to make change, it didn't happen. My children have gone to charter schools, public schools, private schools. They're all in the district now. But at some of the charter schools, I did not have the accountability. There were mismanagement of funds, and when I would question the board and the treasurer about it, I was told, don't worry about that. At one school. Another school, they changed management companies in the middle of the year, did not notify the parents, fired teachers, fired principals, and I just want the best for my children.
So from the charter arena, when at my district, at UPA, when students move in the middle of a year, it really has an impact on the class. it's kind of seen as like, it's almost like the class is going through like a mourning period, like they're going through grief, because they're looking at it like, it's a plate missing from the dinner table. Where is Shine? Why is Shine not here? Why did we not get a chance to say goodbye? And then on the receiving end, if I receive a student like maybe a month into school, it is rough because I have to get them acclimated. If they're not familiar with the UPA district, I have to not only acclimate them to the rigors of our curriculum, I have to acclimate them to the culture of our school. A lot of times it's kind of like getting them reintroduced to what school actually looks like, that this is a nurturing, caring, safe environment.
Dr. Vitti, I want to start with you. How big a priority would you say this issue is in Detroit schools, and specifically in Detroit public schools?
I think it's a reality that obviously we heard earlier that mainly teachers, principals, and even other students are dealing with constantly. I think when we talk about priority, it's more of a policy priority, because I think the solutions here are embedded in policy as far as what Lansing can do differently on a couple of different fronts. One, and actually I think one step in the right direction is the creation of a new accountability system where we can see apples to apples how traditional public schools are doing and charters are doing in Detroit, so parents can at least get some information that is, again, apples to apples as far as standardized test scores, parent surveys, graduation rate, college enrollment, or students taking college and career-ready courses and how they're doing them. Those are just some factors to equalize the conversation, which I think is going to be important to inform parents when they make decisions that the grass is not always greener on the other side because they see a glossy pamphlet.
Are there sort of quickly accessible levers that you feel like can be pulled to really push this in a different direction, or is this a long-term problem?
I agree. It's a short and a long-term situation. So on the education front, even looking at how schools are funded, I think is an opportunity to try to reduce the amount of movement. From the FTE period in October to where we are now, we've seen a 700 student increase in DPSCD schools alone.
Wow.
So that's 700 students that have moved into our system. So the way the funding structure works is there's two FTE counts. There's one in October and then one in the spring. But most of the funding is linked to the first count. So if we maybe equalize the funding where it's 50% in the first count, 50% in the second count, there's less of an incentive to move students out of schools during the first count to the second count. I think that is something structurally from a policy perspective that could help. And then obviously we've talked about this, is just better regulation of charter schools in general. With all that said, I think that there's a quality conversation and an ownership that we have in DPSCD. We've done things like standardized curriculum at the K level, we'll do that at the high school level. That'll help. Last point, outside of K-12, is this is also a socioeconomic issue. So if we want our parents moving less, there are school factors that can be addressed, but simple things like ensuring that families have a consistent, well-paid job with benefits leads them to live in one home in one area, some level of account for affordable housing, addressing heat, water bills are all factors that lead to parents to move from one side of town to the other because of survival issues, which then impact the school system and enrollment.
Yeah.
The first thing we have to remember is that there's no way that the school district can do it by itself. And this is why you have to have strategic partnerships. I believe in purpose-built communities and promised neighborhoods and things of that nature, because it's not only the schools are your anchors, because that's your anchor institution and it always will be, and you have to have strong traditional public schools in your neighborhoods to be able to create that. But then you want to make sure you also have businesses, you have educational programs for adults, that you have food security programs and housing and things like that can help bring some level of stability. I think the other condition that everyone would have to start to agree on is that these are all our kids. When I was superintendent, on paper, we may have had 76,000 students. By the end of the year, I was serving 82,000 kids. So it didn't matter whether, again, what sector that the kids were coming from. They're all our children. And overall, if you looked at literacy rates, transiency rates, absenteeism rates, I believe one of the speakers said earlier, this is an issue that affects all Detroit children. And so it behooves us to start looking at this as a collective issue and being much more intentional. And so things like community schools, some people might think, oh, that's fluff and that's just a nice little pie in the sky. But you can serve, again, as a superintendent, United Way had 4 community schools. We had another 6 agencies that provided those services to another handful of schools. And it's all around the wraparound services that families need. I think the other piece is, let's put programs in that attract people. So, Dr. Vides brought art back and music back into these programs.
You can see more of this very important conversation at AmericanBlackJournal.org.